Hello, I'm Karen Quattromoni, the Director of Public Relations for Object Management Group, OMG. Welcome to our OMG podcast series. At OMG, we're known for driving industry standards and building tech communities. Today, we're focusing on the Augmented Reality for Enterprise Alliance area, which is an OMG program. The area accelerates AR adoption by creating a comprehensive ecosystem for enterprises, providers, and research institutions. This Q&A session will be led by Perey from Perey Research and Consulting.
Hi, I'm Perey, and welcome to this fireside chat. I'm here today with Ognjen Todic of Keen Research. And we're going to be talking about speech, but also other forms of input and the different and new, let's say, emerging forms of interaction that we can expect in our devices for augmented reality going forward. This is part of surveying trends for 2024. So we're talking about things that may come about, but they may not. It's just, we will see. Please, Ogi, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Christine, for having me here. I'm the CEO of Keen Research, and at Keen Research, we develop software development kits for on-device speech recognition on mobile and XR devices, on iOS and Android, on the web, and on custom hardware platforms. So these are all kind of different platforms where our SDK runs. And as I mentioned, the key feature is that it runs locally on the device, offline. It doesn't require internet connectivity, and it can be customized in many different ways. Our customer base spans a variety of verticals, such as educational technology. So we work with a lot of companies that help kids learn how to read or learn a new language. VR training apps for medical workers, or VR apps for speech rehabilitation for children with autism. And then one fairly big segment is also the reason we're part of the area is the frontline worker apps, so both mobile and AR. And these apps help workers complete tasks at hand faster and in a safer way. So this may include products like voice picking, as well as augmented intelligence products like digital workflows, checklists, procedures.
And your focus is on speech to text and text to speech. Is that right?
That's right. It's actually only the former at the moment. Okay. Just recognizing what's being said. And so you as a developer, we work with other companies, we license the SDK to them, and we kind of, our kind of mantra is we want to take the complexity out of the speech recognition. So, you're building a mobile app that's extension of your warehouse management system, and you want to voice enable it. You come to us and you can take our SDK and very quickly add voice-based functionality to your,
Sure.
WMS.
Sure. One of the things that excites me about that is that voice is our fundamental. It's so basic to the human. We've never. Of course we have gestures, we have expressions and things, but for many activities, it's our voice or writing. But are you seeing in these projects that you do new modalities like gaze and gesture, and can you work in combination with speech? What happens when you combine other modalities with speech?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so maybe before we dive into that, I just want to kind of add one more thing when it comes to kind of just speech, and people who have been part of the area, they probably heard us push this kind of thought, which is, when you think about augmented reality, it's very often people think about vision, right? So you have some sort of glasses and you're seeing objects, virtual objects that are augmenting reality, right? and we think that there's a lot of interesting use cases for speech where it can be speech only. So I'm actually taking this slightly in a different direction. I just want to kind of emphasize that there's a number of interesting use cases where, and this doesn't mean that some other input modalities could not help this, but I think there's lots of interesting use cases where voice only interaction can be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
And like if you think about all these virtual assistants that we kind of now are part of our lives, right? You can achieve a lot more now faster. Maybe some things are maybe have been overpromised,
Right.
but and people are always looking for this holy grail. But I think if you think about it as a utility, there's a lot of interesting situations where we're actually much better now because there is this kind of ability to basically interact with just by using your voice. Now, that's not to say that vision is not important, right? And I think now when we introduce that, now you have vision, and you still can use voice for kind of being able to interact in a natural way with some system, right? You can have voice because there's no keyboard, right? So there's lots of interesting things when you think about combining them too. Now, back to your original question, we don't create end user products, so we work with other companies who do that. So we're kind of one step removed maybe from end users and final solutions, but
Yeah.
we talk to other companies. So at the moment, we don't see kind of a huge influx in use of other sensors and combining them in a very kind of meaningful way. That doesn't mean it's not happening, but I also believe that we're very early on in kind of XR adaptation cycle. So I do think that we'll see a lot more solutions that leverage multimodality. And this combination of having all these signals and having information from those signals in a reliable way, right? Being able to analyze gaze and reliably predict, what's going on, being able to, recognize gestures. All of these things are happening, right? But then kind of combining those. So why is this important? Because these signals can, from other sensors, like let's say gaze and gesture, for example, can provide additional context, which could help, for example, speech recognition system.
Right.
It can also make a system more natural, right? So if you're kind of, imagine user is wearing AR glasses and they point to an object and they or gaze, right? Or you look at the object and they say, "What's this?" or "Help me fix this," right?
Yes.
Well, what does this mean here, right? If you can recognize speech, you still
Exactly.
don't know what this is, right? But now if they're pointing to something or looking at something, you can actually disambiguate this, right? And you know what it is, right? So this can make the whole interaction with the system a lot more natural.
Well, I think that's exactly right. Because while speech is so important to humans, it's a unique gift for humans. It's not the only signal. It's not the only way that we interact with the physical worlds or even the digital worlds. So I think that you bring up some really good points about understanding the context of that request or the statement. So when, as you said, you are perhaps a step removed from the actual developer making the AR experiences, do you work more often with the hardware provider or the software developer to integrate your technology?
Mostly software. We're purely software solution. There's a the hardware manufacturers also want to have software on their hardware, right?
Yes.
So this is always kind of a mix of, okay, what do they want to provide kind of on every headset, whatever it is, it comes with a price for them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Versus, maybe we're not going to provide X, Y, and Z, but we know that these three companies can do it. So if you want it, you can use those solutions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So software is primarily, but I think both is
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, well, what are the challenges that those companies that you face when you're working with them? Let me just say, try to unpack that a little bit. So
Mhm.
you of course want your customers, your partners to be as successful as possible with the least amount of delays or costs and things like that. Where do you think your partners need more uh, would be better? Like, do they need better training? Do you need to give them courses on how to use speech as an interface? Do you need better sort of filtering, better microphones? I saw a microphone at CES that picks up a whisper without the outside signals or the noise from the outside interfering with it. That would be sort of a microphone technology that is changing how speech is used. So what sort of help do you think that your partners need to better use your SDK?
Um, our goal is to take the complexity out of the picture when it comes to speech, right? So, to what extent we're successful at that, I think it's our customers' role to speak to that. But that's our kind of what we're aiming for. We're also fairly small and kind of bootstrapped as a company, so we're organically growing. There's so many things we want to do, but we're somewhat constrained, right? So I
Right.
think writing more about how we do things and how to integrate, having some blog posts about different, even when you think about how do you evaluate something, right?
Yes.
Because you come in and it's like, oh, should I use this system or this? Should I use on device or cloud, right? There's lots of questions that if you haven't dealt with this before, all of this is new, and it's like, well, how do I come up with the right decision, right? So we're planning to do more on this front, and then we have some proof of concept demos that we share with our customers, source code, so they can actually both easily try things out, but also that could be a guideline for later. And we'll do more when it comes to kind of blueprint implementation, and demos with specific use cases. Again, some of the demos we've had so far were generic, but
Yes.
we're now doing more.
One of the things that is so fundamental in my understanding of what you do in speech in general is that it is very customized to the end user. So right, that end user will need to do some training so that their speech, that unique person's speech, is easily recognized. Do you have some materials to help the users, the end users, train uh, your SDK?
Actually, with the recent, or maybe even not like last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, there's been kind of a trend. These big deep neural network systems generalize really well. So
Yeah.
you don't really need to. You don't really need to do speaker dependent. That's kind of the term. You don't need to do speaker dependent speech recognition. You don't need to have the end user trained using their voice. And actually, that's the trend we're seeing. That our customers, they don't want to deal with this, because if you think about the end user, that creates more complexity on their end. They need to actually have a workflow for this. um, there's friction before you can start using the system.
Is,
So that part is kind of, for the most part, out of the picture.
is there any role of artificial intelligence in what you're doing? And do you see that in this year or next year?
Yeah, I mean, artificial intelligence is a very kind of general term.
Yeah.
We use deep neural networks, machine learning. All of that is some sort of, you can think of it as some sort of artificial intelligence. Um, but we're at the moment we're focused on speech. I think when it comes to kind of these other what's maybe interesting
Modalities.
is, when it comes to these other modalities, and thinking about, and this is more kind of what happens under the hood, right? Um, you need a lot of training data to train these systems, right? And then there's maybe some, data that's carved out for testing, right? So you use that to evaluate. That's independent from training. You want to have a very authentic test set that will tell you, hey, this is how well something works, right?
Yeah.
So when you start thinking about multiple modalities, then the challenge is, that this kind of space of the data grows exponentially, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
imagine, you have speech data to train, right? If you have to train the system, and this is the trend in the last several years, is to have end-to-end systems, which means you just take all the sensors, signals from all the sensors, and you feed it into some sort of black box to train, and you train it, and it predicts something, right? And then you use the same thing for inference in production. Now, instead of just collecting speech, now you need speech and gaze and something else, right? Gesture, right? Well, this actually having a good coverage with a good representative data set becomes harder. There's also some, module systems. So you train a separate, vision system. So
Yes.
in that example, you may have a really good vision system, and you point to something, it can recognize, the object, and then you integrate that with speech cognition system. So that's a little bit easier when it comes to data. But these are all things that kind of solution providers like us have to deal with, or will have to deal with, when it comes to these different modalities.
Yes, yes, that's excellent. Those are excellent points. And I think you're striking a balance between being able to, you know, um, push push the technology as far as it will go, but you at the same time need to have very satisfied customers and reliable systems. One of the things that's come out of my discussions in these fireside chats is that some of the newer systems are not reliable, that there is uh, errors that could tell someone to do the wrong thing or to go to the wrong place, or that would misinterpret what the user was saying, maybe because this data set was not representative of what that user says or does. Or I asked you a question about hardware. Now it's very common to have 3, 4, 5 microphones. How do you deal with that?
So again, we're a software solution, so we deal with whatever is available. These, like, when you think about smartphones, right? They're built for communication, right? So typically, you can assume for the most part that the part of the microphone part, somebody has figured it out, because otherwise the product is, what's the phone if you can't talk with it, right?
But
That's actually.
But AR glasses is not a phone.
Yeah. So AR glasses, what's easier with AR glasses is, they're right on your nose. Microphones are typically pointing to the user. So this generally, and there's typically more than one microphone, and some sort of beamforming or noise cancellation. Maybe one microphone is pointing to the outside, so it can kind of combine the signals in a smart way to cancel out the noise. So this also depends on, there's a lot of trade-offs. I would say that for these use cases, audio capture and microphones are not a big problem. When I say these use cases we're kind of operating with, right? So you have glasses. There are others. I'll give you an example where it's maybe harder, right? So let's say you want to have something, you have a deaf person, right? And they're wearing their glasses, and you want to show them, captions, really, like what's the other person talking, right? But now those microphones are not working well because they're pointing to the person wearing the glasses, whereas we want to capture the audio from the person across from them,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
So that becomes challenging, right? Do you and you know, whether you can fine tune some of the things, switch the microphones, which one is listening, which one, you know, or the directionality, basically. But yeah, those are harder problems.
But that's an excellent example of a trend that we will see more and more of. And not just a deaf person, but translation. This is universal as we become,
That's right.
a global workforce and so forth. You have people that you're talking to for whom your language is not their language. I think that's a super, super good example of something we could expect to do more of,
Yep.
see more of. Thank you so much, Ogi. This has been very, very enlightening. I wish you the best in the future and in 2024. And thank you for being part of the area.
Thank you, Christine.